All right, so we're here today with a new guest. If you would please tell us your name and your pronouns.
My name is Lily Ann Fouts, and my pronouns are she, her.
Great, thank you very much. So we have a scene analysis that we're doing today, and so tell us a little bit about this scene. What would somebody coming to this want to know?
This is the first scene of the book that I'm writing about responsible travel through the story of my life, basically, in a nutshell.
Nice.
So we're doing a memoir?
This is a memoir, and it basically starts at the time when I'm a child living in Mexico, fall in love with the culture and the town there, leave Mexico against my wishes because I'm still too young to make that call, and always dream of going back. And in between that time, travel a lot and learn a lot about traveling. And it all is relevant to me because I want to be the best person I can be back in this hometown that I dream of returning to.
Okay. Well, that sounds good, and it's helpful in some ways to know that this is sort of a chapter one, scene one, because we don't know anything about it, but that's exactly where we're supposed to be because we're just coming into the story at the beginning. So, all right, Ms. Catherine and I did sort of a combination of the nonfiction rubric, which is available on the Revision Wizards website. This is our first time doing a memoir nonfiction. And the regular scene rubric that we always do for fiction. I chose the scene rubric because this is narrative and you're telling a story. Ms. Catherine chose nonfiction because it's not fiction. So there we go. Ms. Catherine, you want to start us off?
Sure. So I guess we'll start with the problem. Here I said that you marked between fair and good. You mention it, but you without the cover or without knowing a whole lot, I'm not grabbing exactly what the problem is from just reading this section. So the problem was that people, if I remember correctly, it's only been a little bit since I read it, but but that you're trying to get people to understand travel, but also how to do it responsibly and with respect to the culture that is there. So
Yes, essentially. The problem statement actually comes in the next chapter, kind of where I describe like what the problem is that I'm going to solve in the book. This first chapter is more trying to get people interested in the story so they'll keep reading.
Mhm.
Yeah, but that is basically the problem.
I missed the problem statement completely. And maybe that was just because of the direction that I was going to, just looking at it from a narrative point of view. But it heartens me to both hear Ms. Catherine's commentary on it that she did catch it, because sometimes she catches stuff I miss, but also your statement that it's not actually there. So, so I don't feel quite so dumb.
So a solution, I see that it's good. And what I mean by that is that you are offering people, even if they don't know what the problem is yet, to come with you on a journey. So you're not being like, here's what you do. You're offering to drive them or sit in the passenger seat and talk to them as you go about it. So it seems much more, not really one-on-one, but road trippy, if that makes any sense. So
I like it.
So in that case, I thought that the solution was good because you're grabbing the person in that sense, even if we don't quite know exactly what the problem is just yet.
Yeah, I certainly want to read more of the story. I felt like there was definitely some changes that I could make, and we'll get to those when we get to mechanics. But I felt like this was certainly something that grabbed my attention that I want to read more about. So send me the novel when you're done.
Okay.
Because this is a story that appeals to me to begin with. So
That's good to hear. You always want to convey that in a first chapter. So
yeah, yeah, and that sort of goes to the next section on the nonfiction rubric, premise and hook. Is this unique, engaging, and provocative? And I would have rated this good for the most part. It is not something that left me angry that I only had one chapter, but it also was enough to go, well, I really wish I had number two. So it was sort of, it wasn't perfect for me, but it was good enough that I absolutely would continue turning the page if I had more.
Okay.
Nice. So I have
Good to hear.
two hooks really. The way that the flashback is working in this chapter just doesn't seem to work where it's at, because it cuts away from the explosion, which is supposed to be like the, oh, it's so nice to see, poof, in the background. You're like, what? And then you're like, back in the day. So it just takes away from that explosion moment. And then the other hook was the fugitive statement, where it's like this whole long list of who you're running away from. And now I'm very curious because I'm like, wait, but did you get away from them? Was this continued? Are you still in hiding? Like, so there's a whole bunch of questions there. So I thought it was fair in the sense that with the flashback, we just got to move the flashback somewhere. And I think that you'll have a hook that'll just keep people going.
Okay. Now, the reason I switched where I did, and maybe you can help me, like, as we converse today, figure out how a better way to do that would be. But I wanted to leave them hanging so they would keep reading to figure out what that explosion was later on. So that's why I cut away at that point was, okay, so I'm going to go back and tell you what happened, but keep reading. You'll eventually get back to the explosion and find out what that was all about. I don't know if I did that. Apparently I didn't do that quite right. So I'm very curious to hear some solutions or options to take there.
Well, with the rest of the chapter, I felt like it was pretty obvious that the explosion was at least something having to do with the drug war. And that was real clear and real easy to a conclusion to draw. So if that's the right conclusion to draw, then that might be a problem because it's too predictable.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So, Catherine, what do you think?
Yeah, I could see that. Although, I mean, yeah, that all just went out the window. Give me a moment to think it back over again. Yeah, I could definitely see that it's very almost easy way out. You're in Mexico. They are unfortunately known for their drug cartel. You hear an explosion. It's not like you're in like the United States where you would hear an explosion and be like, well, hold on, what is that? Or if you're in like different countries, different explosions will be like, oh my God. Or just an everyday occurrence. And the way Maria Teresa had acted was almost as if this was an everyday occurrence. Don't worry, sweetie, go to bed. So, so yeah, we'll have to come up with something.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, really good points you're bringing up there. So,
yeah. The next section on the nonfiction rubric is authenticity. I feel like if it's memoir, it darn well better be authentic, because otherwise you're not writing memoir, you're writing fiction.
Yep.
And so, but the credibility came through that you did have this experience. This is something that was real for you, and that you're telling at least your retelling of a true story. Memoir is always colored by all memory is colored by the person doing the remembering. And this is obviously no exception. What your mother remembers, what your father remembers, what Maria Teresa remembers is going to be slightly different from your memory. But that's okay. and it comes through that this is your authentic story.
Yeah, I went with the side of research when I was looking at that section because yeah, I mean it's your memories, so of course I'd hope it was authentic. So in my sense, I went with the research side. So I rated this good based on the research because in this you're talking from the authentic side and that you've mentioned you've done research, but you haven't shown us what it is and you're going to ask us to come along for the ride for it. So I thought that that was good in that sense where you're telling somebody, hey, I have answers to these things. I'm just not giving you it in chapter 1.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that leads on to almost the research section, which is literally, I mean,
Have you done the
yeah,
research?
I put underdeveloped because in
Yeah.
this chapter, there is no research. I mean, there's your memories that have been researched, but other than that, that's it. And I just realized that I sent you like my PDF and it screwed itself up. So I'll have to resend that to you.
It looked okay to me, but
Oh, okay.
what I received. Yeah.
All right, good. Then it's just screwing itself up on my end. It's fine.
Yeah. So the next section is organization. Basically, the question is the book logically organized? I thought it was reasonably well organized, and it was clear that you jumped into a flashback. I am not sure that the flashback is necessary because it's your experience as a child, and you're comparing and contrasting your lived experience as a child versus your lived experience as an adult. I am not sure that the way you did that jump was right. And we just talked about that where, explosion and then flashback. You may be able to rework that in a way that instead of doing it as a flashback, as a firm flashback, the way you've done it, where you completely change time periods, you, your character, your lead character, goes through and has her conversation with Maria Teresa now, and you sprinkle in the memories as character thought, or I don't know if this is in your. I'm. This is an ethical question about memoir, but do you want to have a conversation with Maria Teresa about those differences? Because it's reasonable to believe that you would have. Oh, I noticed this is different. That seems like a reasonable question that you might have asked. I don't know if you did. And if you didn't, then maybe you shouldn't you shouldn't create a scene where there isn't one. But that sort of back and forth compare and contrast, you can bring in the elements that you remember without doing a firm flashback if that's not, if it works better that way.
That is an interesting thought to bring it in. I would have to invent a conversation, but the content of the conversation would still be true story. So, it wouldn't be like I'm completely making things up. The conversation itself could be a reconstruction of, thinking back to years earlier. I can explore that as an option. That might be a good way to do it.
Yeah, I had marked it for, and I put just this chapter because I don't know how the rest of the book is. But I think the flashback, it needs to be moved around. So I marked it as fair. And like once you move it, it'll be fine. We just have to figure out where. And I did mark a few spots where I thought you jumped back into the present and then went, present, 2010, and then went back further. So I did mark that, and I wrote like, oh, hey, if you just cut this sentence out and then put it over here, that'll keep it going. And I marked 2 spots.
I saw that catch.
Yeah.
I was like, good catch.
Thank you.
Yeah, I missed that one.
Yeah, I didn't even, you write stuff, you don't notice that, but that was a really good catch. So thank you for pointing that out.
Yeah. And then I marked 2 spots that I think the flashback could go. So there was one where I think it was just after the explosion, or them talking about the explosion, and you're thinking about how it's unsafe to be there. And then you would do the flashback into, hey, look, this is what it was like, but then I had to leave, and now I'm still confused. And hold on, other people don't get to leave. So I have that version in there, and I cannot remember where I put the other one. There was like 2 spots. I marked
Yeah, but you did mark. I saw that at least 2 spots where you like could go here.
it.
So I'll play around with it with those different options and see how it flows.
Yeah.
Okay. The next section on the nonfiction rubric is emotional tone. I felt like the emotional tone for this was just about right. I had mechanical difficulty with the writing, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But it, I got a sense of wistfulness for the world that was during childhood. It came through that those memories are positive and good for you. It came through that your new experience of this place as an adult was confusing and different. And I think that that's what you were going for, both with the 2010 and with the flashback. I think that the emotional tone was excellent. It it gives me a sense of where you were and where you're at as you continue through your story. With these 2 threads of your childhood versus your adultness, your adulthood, and your the differences between your 2 experiences. I think that, I don't know. Obviously, I don't know if that's the thread you're trying to open up with this flashback, and you'll continue the dual threads as we go through the story. But that sort of is what I would be expecting at the end of the. We'll see your continuing childhood and your continuing exploration of your adulthood.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that because I did want to really give a sense to the reader of how special this place is to me. Kind of that's what I have this emotional investment in this place, and I love it so much, and I want to go back there so badly, and I'm just not sure I can because of the safety issue at this point. So yeah, and where can I go? Because I don't feel like anywhere is home except there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it makes sense that you would, given the safety issues that you would have, that you would especially stick out in that kind of environment as a privileged white woman, you know. And it makes sense that would lead to some confusion, and that came through.
Can you repeat the
So
last thing that you said because it froze up for me?
Oh, okay. It seems like that your confusion with not feeling like home, that anywhere is like home, and the idea that you can't come back to this place, because of the danger, you would stick out as a, frankly, as a privileged white person in this environment, and that would make
Mm-hmm.
you a target for things like ransoms and kidnappings and extortion, and because you know that's
Right,
what can happen, and that
right,
would obviously be a concern.
correct.
so for me, I thought the emotion got a little lost with the switching of times. You would start feeling a connection to one version of yourself, and then you would swap it. And just as you're starting to get acquainted with that person, you go back. So I felt that the switch had been um, a little jarring for the like emotional connection. You have all the emotions there, but I feel when we move the flashback a little bit that you'll get a deeper connection. We'll feel this nostalgic that you have to this home. And then the reality of, I can't be here anymore. And that lost feeling.
Mm-hmm.
At the moment, you have the nostalgia, and then you're going back into, well, there's an explosion. So now we're back into the present. and everything just seems to be like, oh, we're sad. So
Yeah.
I feel
Okay.
like it's good. It's getting there.
Yeah,
I
just
I
a
will
little
say that
rearrangement.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I will say that I felt more of an emotional connection with the child Lily than I did with an adult.
Ooh,
I don't know
Mm-hmm.
if that's intentional or not, but the character that I latched onto was the child.
that's
Okay.
interesting. I latched on to the adult version.
Everybody's
Yep.
different.
We always have to be contradicting, VE.
Of course, I we wouldn't have a podcast if I wasn't.
Oh.
So, what about pacing, Miss
So
Catherine?
pacing for me, I highlighted and combined sections for you in this one. So I wrote there lacks transition between movements of the scene, almost like it contains tangents that slow the pace from problem to solution. So for me, the the blockage that you have set up at the moment almost seems tangent like to get to the problem. You're trying to be like, look, it's nostalgic, but now we're back to the present. And it just felt slightly off to me.
Okay.
I would agree. I feel like the two threads that we have here are paced slightly differently, um,
Mm-hmm.
and so they are generating a different emotional response. And I don't know if that's what you're intending or not, but that goes back to which character that I latched onto, um, and so I feel On the other hand, the question on the rubric, does my book keep the reader turning pages? Yes, that's a firm yes from me. And I wanted to continue reading, and so that's positive. Um, I feel like, and it may be something with reworking the rework, or when you rework the flashback, either by moving it or by making it, by creating a conversation, or creating even an internal conversation where we're not necessarily talking to Maria Teresa, but we're watching Lily have her own thoughts and feelings. Um, that's dialogue as well, and so we can do that, and that situation helps us see Lily's voice in what's going on here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Shall we wait on the three C's until you go through some of the other rubric?
Well, the only thing really that I was going to go through on the other rubric was, frankly, the
Oh, okay.
mechanical. The three C's are the big. The three C's are the big thing to go through. Um, I felt like, from a scene perspective, the conflict was pretty clear. Um, the two threads, of adult Lily and child Lily, brought that into focus. Where this is, this is not. We're not in Kansas anymore. You know, and that struck me as the main conflict of this story, that we have gone back to this place that we have fond memories of, that we loved, and it is not that place anymore, and something is wrong here.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that conflict, um, there is a world in which I can see that conflict would continue as a thread through the whole story.
Yeah.
Catherine?
I
Yeah.
did the two conflicts. The past one, which I put as underdeveloped, but you were a kid, you didn't really get a choice or like it all happened to you. So that was fine. We
Yeah.
we saw it happening. You didn't get a choice. I am curious to know how old you were at the time. That was something I felt like I missed throughout. I know that your sister was
Okay.
8, but I have no idea if you're older, if you're younger, where you are in relation to
Yeah. So at the time we left Mexico, I was 13.
that.
But yeah, I should probably clarify ages in there.
Okay. So yeah, so a lot of that was happening to you. So on all of those, I'm like, sorry, like you don't get a say because you're a child, and I know that feeling. But then, so for the 2010, I felt that the conflict was fair. So it's home is no longer safe, is what I saw was the conflict. So it's that moment where you're sitting at the table and it hits you guys that um, this might not be the area you want to move into if an explosion happens a kilometer away. So that for me was the conflict.
Interesting. I saw that as more of the choice. Like, should I risk going back to the place that I love where all my friends still are, but it's dangerous? Or should I go somewhere that doesn't feel like home, but maybe I'm safer? That was kind of the way I saw it, is that's a choice. So it's very interesting. I could see how it could be a conflict as well.
Okay.
Very
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah. Well, I felt like the choice was propelling us in the direction of which way do I go? Can I do, can I come home, or do I have to stay away and be, essentially be a nomad in a place that, that isn't home? Um, I, but I felt like if that's the choice that we're making, that was not super well developed. It's obvious in a way, and it didn't to me seem to pull on her heart hard enough.
Okay.
Now that can be something that it doesn't necessarily have to do that in this scene, because it is only the opening scene. Not every choice on a scene level needs to be a life and death kind of decision. This could be a global choice, and then it becomes a heart-wrenching, what do I do, which baby gets to live, kind of question. But I thought it was reasonable enough to be going on with, but it was not presented as a heart-wrenching choice. I think in part that's because the 2010 Lily it wasn't decision time. It wasn't time to pull the switch yet. We were just still sort of investigating our options.
Right.
Interesting.
But it's going to be much harder when it's time to actually, put money down on your choice.
Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
I feel like that comes in 2019.
9 years later. Got it.
Yes.
For me, I saw the choice was to either reevaluate your situation and your ideas about something, or sit around and mope and then ignore it. And that's what I saw as that moment. And like, because I'm picturing you sitting at the table, you're all like, oh no. And you're starting to like really think over things. And either people sometimes don't like to think about their situation and come to realizations, and they'll stop themselves. And I felt like you made the choice sitting at that table to continue to think about it and to actually broaden what you had thought you originally wanted to do. So I thought that was the choice, was to actually reevaluate what you wanted.
Mm.
That makes sense to me, as well. I thought that was, but that was not the approach that I took. So, or that, the approach that I got. So, what about consequence, Miss Catherine?
So for my consequence, again, your past self had no choice. No, they just had to leave. But your 2010 version of you, so there's two consequences in that. There is the reader consequence, and then there is the narration. So for the narration, I saw that the consequence is that you decide to learn more about this revelation that you've made. for the reader, their consequence is, here's a book. Are you going to jump? So like you've now got this far. You've, picked up this book because you had the conflict. You've chosen to read it. Your consequence is now there's a rest of the book. I'm not giving it to you right up front. So that's what I felt was a good lead in that sense. I liked the way you had offered, like I said, to do the road trips. So that was with like the readers. So for me, the consequence was definitely learning about the revelation. And now you're going to explore that throughout the rest of the book. And you're also having a consequence for the readers.
I hadn't thought about it from the reader point of view. That's really interesting. Yeah. I like it.
Good. I felt like the consequence here was that 2010 Lily is just forced to re-examine her life and her values and her plans, and I think that that's perfectly appropriate in this sort of chapter 1 scene 1 kind of writing. I thought it was pretty good.
Okay.
It's enough to begin to set up the next conflict, as she continues to do her investigation and continues to try and make choices, and reflect on her world and her experience.
Yeah, we wonder how that turned out. We just don't know. If only we knew somebody we could ask. No.
I died. No.
Oh, it's an autobiography. Got it. No.
No, it's a it's a flat biography written by your ghost.
Yeah, right.
So if we switch to the scene rubric, if we go to the mechanic stuff, down toward the bottom, Ms. Catherine, what did you think about showing versus telling here?
I felt there was a lot of telling. There were little moments where I marked LOL because I laughed. The painted houses, that got me. That still stands out to me. Where your mom's like, look at these beautiful houses. And then you pull up to a non-painted house. I thought that was the best. Or it's like, this is a non.
That's funny. I never even thought about that as I was writing it. But that's hilarious.
So I did feel like it was a lot of telling, but you're also flashbacking, and flashbacking does a lot of telling. So yeah, that's how I think of it.
I feel like you can do a lot of showing in a flashback if you write it correctly. I mean, you can still show in a flashback and still make it clear that it is a flashback. 15 years ago, the issue that I had, in some ways, was telling through a fourth wall break. I think, to put it bluntly, the last two paragraphs need to go completely.
Okay.
I love those. That's we're always so different.
Yeah.
Well, you can both give me your opinions and I'll make a decision here.
And you can make a decision. That's the joy of being the author, is that you can make a decision. Those experiences would ultimately, this is how I rewrote it a little bit, those experiences would ultimately make me question my right to travel or move abroad at all. Period. End of chapter. The next paragraph, an invitation to the reader. If you weren't inviting the reader along, you wouldn't have written the book. So that's plainly obvious. And then, fasten your seatbelt and the whole cliche about the the plane trip.
I loved it.
Yeah.
I didn't know if that was going to work or not. Apparently it worked for half the readership.
It did work for half the readership. I thought it was funny in context, but I think that the whole cliche is just too cliched.
Okay.
I liked it.
I wondered if it might be a little too much.
So I think those last two paragraphs are the consequence for the reader. That's that moment of, hey, you're stuck on this road trip now with me. So I liked it, but that's just me, I guess. I do like the way he ended
Yeah.
his as well.
Yeah.
I could
So
potentially keep that ending in there, but change it so that it is not a cliche. Like, still invite the reader, but in a non-cliched way. I'll have to think
yeah,
on that a little bit.
yeah, that's because in some ways cliches are cliches for a reason and everybody understands them, but they can also indicate lazy writing, and you're not a lazy writer,
I try
and
not to
you
be.
and your yeah,
Sometimes
and
I
your
am.
readers are and your readers are intelligent enough to be able to comprehend what you're trying to communicate to them without a cliche. So I think that you could definitely rewrite that in that way. Miss Catherine?
Yes. There is the idea that do you do this again later on in the book where you're directly talking to the reader? Because if you are, then you would want to keep that in the beginning to let the reader know that that's going to happen multiple times throughout the book. Because if not, then that's the only moment. Or if you take it out and then like two
Mm-hmm.
chapters later you're talking to the reader, they're going to be like, well, that wasn't what's happened at all throughout so far.
Yeah, no, I kind of want it to be conversational throughout the book where I'm speaking to them and, like figuring things out together with them, kind of a feel.
See, here we go with the differences again. I sort of disfavor those kinds of things, but I also recognize that it is author voice, you know. And so you can do it either way. I feel like as long as you do it consistently. Miss Catherine is pointing at herself, saying, "My way, my way." Yes, we all know Miss Catherine wins. So
Okay.
anyway,
Excellent food for thought.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
I have
So
a quick little thing on back to the flashbacks and so forth. Do you think I should just go straight chronological? Start the book when I'm a child and then come to the point where we're back in Mexico in 2010 in a separate next scene? Do you think that's an option, or do you think I should still start it in 2010 and jump back at some point just at a different point
I thought about that
if I do that?
reading through it, whether or not, because I think that's the other thing I mentioned, where it was like, hey, flip this, start the flashback, and then go into the explosion stuff. I think that was the, I have both for you, I guess. I have either flip it to the
Okay.
beginning or put it at the end. I'm trying to think, because
I'm just wondering if that flashback scene is enough of a grab at the beginning. The reason I put the explosion first is like I want to hook the reader, with an exciting initial scene, and I felt like the early childhood version was not grabby enough.
I mean,
But I don't know.
you could also start something like in October of 1992, I was ripped from my home. And then go into a little bit of, hey, look, I loved this place. And then I'm back, but it's not the same.
Mm. Yeah, that's
the
yeah.
other way that occurs to me is you could do a paragraph or two about this is the place that I loved in 1992, and it always felt like home, and then I was ripped away from it. Then we come to 2010, where then you sprinkle in sort of the rest of the flashback and memories of how it had changed, observations of how it has changed, and then you could go to that constructed dialogue that we talked about.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
We're giving you like 6 different ways to go with this.
I mean, options to consider. These are a lot of these things are things I hadn't thought of before, so it's good to get different perspectives and like here's a way you can think about doing it. Like all of that is really helpful.
Awesome.
So, Miss Catherine, My favorite section, passive voice. What do you think?
So it's his favorite section because my work is really filled with a lot of passive voice, so I've been working on that. So I did notice places where I was like, ooh, passive voice. So for me as the editor brain now, I'll notice it a lot more than my reading brain. I do feel like there are times where the the present or the 2010 version seemed almost slower than the flashback.
Mm.
So I feel like that could have been helped by removing the passive voice, because at least in the, if you want that explosion to be the piece, then have something more around it than just, well, and then she went to bed. Like, okay. I mean, I guess maybe that's exactly what you did. You're like, yeah, that was fireworks. Sure, we're going to say they're fireworks. And then you went to bed.
I choose to believe they're fireworks so I can sleep
Yeah.
tonight.
So, but even, I guess, even there, you could then do a flash into the sense of you're trying to think of them as just fireworks and be like, hey, this was the past. It used to be this beautiful place versus now. So, bam, another
Yeah.
version. But yeah, I noticed some passive voice, but I'm going to hand that back over to VE because he's better at it than I am.
I thought there was a lot of passive voice in it. I didn't take the time to rewrite every sentence where I could. The standard advice that I give for people who want to crush passive voice is to try and recast your sentences in a way that removes the words was, had, and were, and their descendants hadn't, wasn't, those kinds of things. And so um, by removing those words from your writing vocabulary, you will automatically force yourself to write more active voice. And I feel like a lot of this, a lot of these memories, especially in the flashback, could benefit from that. You can do that as you rewrite the flashback, such that now we're in 1992 Lily's head, and we are experiencing her experiences real time, versus 2010 Lily is telling us what 1992 Lily experienced. If you
Okay.
go that direction with the whole flashback sequence, you're going to wind up with a more active memory, because 1992 Lily experienced this actively. So I think that's a direction you could want to go.
Okay. Now I have a question for the two of you
Yes.
on, I think it's somewhat related to this. Present tense telling a story, like writing a book in present tense. Are you fans of that style of writing? I know it feels a little bit more like you're in it because it's happening right now. I know some people hate it, some people love it. I would love to know what you guys feel of that style of writing.
It's hard to do, but I do
Hmm.
like it. My favorite book that's written that way is Snow Crash by Neal Stephenson. It is written in third person present tense, um, which is a weird way to do it, but I've been seeing more of that since that book came out. That book is probably 15 or 20 years old now. It's a pretty old book, but it is for me still a masterwork in present tense and the immediacy of present tense. Um, I feel like it works well. A memoir works well in present a lot of times, um, depending on how you write it. The hard part is we don't usually write in present tense. And so you're going to wind up with accidental tense switches,
Hmm.
particularly in scenes where you originally wrote them in past tense and then changed them.
Hmm.
That's where you wind up with the the errors in
A lot of
tense.
typos.
I did not catch any errors in tense here, and that's good because I find them to be very jarring. But if you're going to do first person present tense, go ahead and do it. It's engaging. You can read it, but you got to be careful of the passive voice because that kills the immediacy. And then you also have to make sure that you stay in that voice.
Yeah. I've thought about experimenting with that. There's one memoir that I've read that was written in present tense. It was The Sky Below by Scott Parazynski, astronaut. I thought it was excellent, but I know it can be tricky.
Yeah. And so the question then becomes, do you want to do it? And are you do you feel like you're a good enough writer to pull it off? I think the answer to that question is yes. But, so.
Okay. Another thing to experiment with.
Yeah. Okay, we need to pause for a second. How are you doing, Miss Catherine? We can hear you. Again.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. Okay, do you need to get out and come back cuz you're on the one that's not recording right now? That's good. Okay. Okay. Yeah, that's true. I can cover that in the audio. That's not a problem.
uh, technical difficulties. Always
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah, we record on Riverside because it gives me 3 or however many individual tracks. So I can do, like, if you have some background noise, like there's a barking dog or a train comes by or whatever, if you happen to not be speaking, I can just chop that right out.
Cool. Yeah,
And
that's
so,
awesome.
yeah. But Catherine has been having some trouble with it. Some of it we attribute to her poor internet at her home. She's not at her home today, but I think that some of it is also, her computer. And hopefully her new computer will help her with that.
I have returned.
Yeah.
Nothing? Hello?
We got you.
Oh, okay.
You're there.
All right. I am very much delayed, but that's okay.
You seem to be okay at the moment.
Oh, okay. I don't know what the last part we left off on because I attempted to join with my phone, but that wasn't working either.
Oh, okay. Miss Catherine, did you have any comments about the passive voice in this?
Nope. I'm bad at passive voice personally. So, I do notice it now, so that is something. So if I'm noticing it and I'm bad at it, there could be places to remove it. I guess
I will go
What
back
about
and look through there and make sure I've got those all cleaned up. This was a very rough first draft, so I'm not too surprised that you're finding some issues there.
no.
Well, that's what, readers are that's what we're for, because if we find them, then your reader will not. And these are the kinds of mechanical issues that will, at least for me, will rip me right out of a story. And so I try and be a stickler in my own writing and in people that I'm working with to make sure that these mechanical issues are not in their writing, because you don't want your reader ripped out of a story or to have trouble trying to parse what you're trying to say. You want them to get what you're trying to say or not get what you're trying to say, if that's your goal. If you're writing a mystery, you want to confuse them. But you don't want the English language to be the barrier to their understanding. And I'm a big stickler about that.
Yes, he is.
to that end, I felt like the sentence structure, which is the next section, the last section of the scene rubric, was very good. I didn't have trouble parsing the sentences, generally speaking. I did have some places where I added words, I removed words, word choice stuff, moved some things
Mm-hmm.
around, tightened a little bit. But overall, I thought it was pretty good mechanically. I didn't have. You had some layout and design issues, or some issues that will bite you when you get to layout and design and publishing. For example, your hard carriage returns between your paragraphs; those have got to go.
Mm-hmm.
Um, uh, and sometimes you had at the end of a paragraph an extra space; those have got to go. Now that's all cleanup that you can do later, but when you get to the point where you're putting it into tools like Atticus or Vellum, those are going to make your life miserable. And so the way you want to format your manuscript is you want your text, a single carriage return to end your paragraph, text. You can have your layout and design program and even your word processor can do space between paragraphs, can do indents and things like that. And all you got to do is use that format and then set the paragraph formatting correctly. Usually it's under the paragraph formatting where you can set those things. Um, if you do hard carriage returns, blank lines encoded into your text, you're going to wind up with weirdly formatted text. And if you're doing hard copy, which, everybody wants a hard copy of their book, you're going to see down at the bottom of your pages, your lines are not going to, the bottom of your pages are not all going to line up.
Mm.
Because some of your paragraphs are going to break at the bottom of the page, and then you'll have a blank line there. But on the next page, the page will end in the middle of a paragraph, and so it will line up against that blank line.
Mm-hmm.
And so the solution to that problem is to not have blank lines in your paragraphs. And then tools like Atticus and Vellum can do those indents that we were taught in elementary school at the beginning of a paragraph.
Okay.
You didn't have any tab characters, but you don't want tab characters to set up your paragraphs either. For the same reason, you can get much finer control if it's just text carriage return, text carriage return, text carriage return. So that's
Okay.
my little rant.
That is really a good thing to think about. I did not even consider that. And I'm using Scrivener, so I think I can make the settings, work on the settings to make that happen.
Are you including the blank lines in your Scrivener documents?
I think I do have blank lines. I'm terrible. I'm not always consistent, and I need to be. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, there
Yeah,
are
that's an
some areas where, for whatever reason, it automatically has like an indented paragraph. And
mhm.
then when I hit return, it indents the next paragraph automatically. And I just leave it when that happens. When it doesn't indent, I'll put another space in. So because I've pasted in some things I've written previously and so forth, the formatting ends up different on different uh, documents within Scrivener.
Mhm.
And I need to go through and just standardize everything.
Yeah, when we're offline, I can show you how to do mass formatting, because
Awesome.
you can reformat your entire document, just by selecting all your text and then pushing the formatting that way. And then also remember that your formatting in Scrivener, when you see it on your screen, has absolutely nothing to do with what the reader sees.
Yeah, I've discovered that.
Yeah. So you can change the font. You can, if you like writing in Arial, which I personally absolutely hate, that's fine. And then you can present it to your readers in Bookerly without any trouble at all. I mean, if you want to write in Comic Sans because you like the way it looks, you can hide that from your reader, without a problem. As long as you do the formatting consistently, usually you can fix it in post.
Okay. Yeah, I would love, if you have any quick tips for that, I would love to talk to you about that.
Okay.
Nice. Yeah, he's the one to go
All right,
to.
I will,
Scrivener's the devil.
I love Scrivener. I'm not using it to its full capacity.
Nobody does. It is such a powerful Swiss Army knife that,
Yeah.
nobody uses everything in it. And that's fine. I mean, I don't use everything in it. I have a few tools that I use, but, and to be fair, I think that the compile function is awful. But,
I think
there
it's
are
worse
some
now
nice
than it
things about
used
it.
to be.
Yeah, in
Whatever.
version 3 they've made it's much more powerful, but in version 3 it's more difficult to use in my opinion. So, on the other hand,
Yeah.
every tool that you use is going to have its drawbacks. I can't imagine doing a 200,000 word manuscript in Google Docs.
It's not too
I
bad.
just can't.
I
It's
use.
so much easier to organize in Scrivener.
I find it
You
really easy
move
to
things
organize in
around
Google
so
Docs.
easily.
Yeah. So, all right. Was there anything that we missed, Lily? Or what comments do you have after?
Yeah, I think you caught a lot that I missed, and for that I'm very grateful. There are so many little things that you pointed out, like, oh, I didn't even think of that or notice that. So it's so good to get that feedback. I really appreciate it. This has been great. I'm looking forward to going in and experimenting with some of the ideas we tossed around. I'll
Good.
let you know which of you won in terms of whose way we do it. I might take a little bit of each of your ideas. We'll see.
Nice.
When in doubt, go with Catherine. That's just the way of the world,
Unless it's line
In a
edits.
podcast,
But
even
thank
in a
you.
podcast marriage, we know who's always right. So,
Or spelling. Don't take my word on spelling.
all right. Well, I guess we'll leave it at that, and we'll wish everybody a good day. And that's our conversation with Lily Ann Fouts. We forgot to ask her on the recording, but you can find her at lilyannfouts.com, LILYANNFOUTS.com. There you can find the first chapter of her first memoir, 7 Years Running, which is the story of her childhood as a fugitive, as well as other books she's written.
Yeah, and you can find our podcast transcripts, videos, rubrics, and more at revisionwizards.com. You can find me individually at scribes-pen.com.
And you can find me individually at vegriffith.com.
Stay magical.
Bye.